and foolishness, and the things will always be so. They're not going to change. And so you could print that book 1,000 years from now if the world still stands. And it's all the same because the wisdom that is expressed there. And certainly the book of Proverbs, as we're studying about that, is that way. It is fitly spoken. However, this has a more specific context to it, and that is speaking to someone when just the right thing needs to be said. The apples of gold are thought to be, and I warn you, not everybody agrees on this, but are thought to be some type of golden fruit, which have been very pleasing to the eye back in Bible times. And so that probably, I guess some apples do have a gold or an orange, yellowish tint to them. But nobody's agreed on what the fruit is, but probably something in the gold category. That's why it's apples of gold, a fruit of gold of some kind, in settings of silver. And the setting would be some kind of basket or intricate thing, beautiful type object for holding things. It's made out of silver, which of course would only be owned by someone who's fairly wealthy, probably. So we're talking about the setting in perhaps a palace or something like that. And perhaps when these words were spoken, when Solomon said that, he might have just been looking at one of the royal bowls there, made out of probably a lattice work of silver, a beautiful basket or bowl sort of thing with some golden fruit inside of it. He thought, that is just beautiful. That's pleasing to the mouth. If I were to taste it, it's pleasing to the eyes. I look upon it. It's a work of art. So the point was being made is that a word that is spoken at the right time, fitly spoken, a word that is at the opportune moment. They say that the Hebrew word here has to do with the rolling of wheels, the rolling of something. And so the idea is that of something that arrives at just the right time. If you were working on a project and somebody brought you something that you needed, you say, you got here at just the right time. I really needed that, as they rolled in on the car or the bicycle or whatever they rolled in on. Well, here we have the picture of a word, maybe a word of encouragement, a word of instruction, a word of warning. And that word rolls in just about this at the right time, the opportune moment to help somebody, encourage somebody, or warn somebody. So certainly, as beautiful, as nutritious, as desirable and pleasant as that golden fruit in the silver setting. That was the word that was spoken in due season or at the right time. So this is kind of I think a core verse, an introductory verse for what we're talking about tonight as we think about wisdom from the book of Proverbs, dealing with using the tongue in the correct way, how to use the tongue, just as we talked last week about how not to use the tongue. And as I suggested last week, it's impossible really to present these without maybe a little bit of overlap, and certainly with Proverbs, Hebrew Proverbs that contain both, because that's the nature of Hebrew poetry many times. If you do this, you'll get this. If you do get this, you'll get this. Where one is a good outcome, the other is a bad outcome, or something like that, parallelism. So we're going to have both some good and bad, and we're going to focus mostly on how to use the tongue, the positive sense, as we look at these. Okay, first of all, in chapter 10, and if you follow along your Bible, hopefully you are, we're going to be turning through in numerical order as we make our way through Proverbs. And I've got a couple different passages here from the chapter, and I've kind of kept these together just for us to follow along in chapters. The mouth of the righteous is a well of life, but violence covers the mouth of the wicked. Here we want to focus on the first phrase there because that's about the good part. The mouth of the righteous, okay, that's where the tongue comes in. What is it? And that's what almost all of these comparisons are in the book of Proverbs. It's what the correct use of the tongue is to us in a positive sense. In this way, it's a well of life. We remember that the folks of Solomon's time, in fact, the folks of Jesus' time, were very cognizant of how important a water source was. A well of life probably meant much more to them than it does to us, because they lived in a land where sometimes you would go a great distance before you found a water supply which you could get a drink from. Whereas wherever we are, almost anywhere, we turn on a faucet. We pick up a bottled water. You know, we aren't worried about where our next drink of water is coming from. But not so in that place. And so the idea of the well of life being available. The well of life was that which sustains, which preserves, as it's used here, speech, of comforting, encouraging, so that's the concept from nature about what's good about the mouth of the righteous. The follower of God wants them to live the right way. Their counsel, their work, like giving someone wisdom, providing not physical life, but spiritual life to them. It would be like a well of life, as of such great importance to them. Then we're going to skip down a verse there or so to verse 13, 14. Wisdom is found on the lips of him who has understanding, but a rod is for the back of him who is devoid of understanding. Wise people store up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction. Words indicate wisdom. Wisdom is found where? On the lips of him who has understanding. How do you tell, many times, if a person is what you would call a wise person? You listen to what they have to say. You listen to someone for very long, and you can probably conclude this is a person who believes in the Bible. This is a person who's serious about living for Jesus Christ. Or this is a person who believes basically what the world believes. We can do that, can't we? If we talk to somebody, we listen to somebody very long, we know where they're coming from. We know whether the wisdom which is from above is in their minds and in their hearts or not, because the words indicate that to us. Wisdom is found on the lips of him who has understanding. It's an identifying sign. It's something that we can most surely see. Wise people store up knowledge, and the phrase there is the kind of word that would be used for storing up treasure, having a treasure house, having a collection of that which is valuable to you. A king would probably have a treasure room or treasure rooms if he were wealthy, such as Solomon was. Other average people would perhaps have just a place where they hide that which is valuable to them. They would store up their treasure there. But that's what it is storing up treasure. Wise people, they treasure knowledge. They don't keep it in a secret place. They don't have to hide it from anybody or keep it from being stolen. They keep it in their hearts. And it is like a treasure to them. And as I thought about this, and I thought about a lot of places we probably talk about this, but I have to think about what James says in James 1:19. I don't like to do a whole lot of New Testament references because we're going to need our time to study Proverbs, but I think that's so applicable there. What does James say about the use of the tongue in James 1 in verse 19? Every one of you be swift to what? Listen, slow to speak, slow to wrath or anger. Okay? And many of these Proverbs, as I read them, I'm thinking, yeah, James, of course, James is sort of called, some of the things James has to say. He's thought of by some commentators as sort of the Proverbs or the wise, pithy sayings like the book of Proverbs has of the New Testament. Some of the things he says like that in 1:19. So, again, here is how to use the tongue to comfort, to demonstrate wisdom. Even though that's not what we're trying to do, that's the way it's indicated. and something that is to be stored up or treasured, and not necessarily spoken freely. He knew had been tested, and which was true. It had been refined. It had been assayed as to its value and its content. You had over here something else that looked like, well, it might have some silver in it, but boy, you can tell by the appearance, or you can tell by the test that it's got all kinds of impurities in it. No, I'm not even sure he would want that. Well, you would choose the one that was pure. So that's the picture here. Chosen silver. Somebody like Solomon probably, you know, had an eye for that because his kingdom was was so rich as far as gold and silver and everything else that counted for earthly wealth. So he probably had a pretty good idea of what silver looked like and the different kinds of silver and that which would be choice and that which would not be choice. The heart of the wicked is worth little. So contrast is the heart of the wicked, there's not a lot of value there, but we're talking about the tongue of the righteous person. And remember, we talk about the tongue and the heart, we're talking about two interconnected things. The heart determines what the tongue speaks. The tongue speaks what is in the heart. And so we have one case of great value, another case of little worth, according to the psalmist. All right, we continue. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of wisdom. The lips of the righteous feed many. What do you think about when you think about that statement? How would that happen? The lips of the righteous feed many. What's Solomon talking about? If he speak wisdom to him and he listens, he may do well. Will he be fed spiritually or fed morally? Fed as far as righteousness is concerned? You know, and of course, I think that's the basic idea here. There might be a physical application somewhere, but Solomon wasn't talking about feeding many people physical food. He's talking about feeding them that which nourishes the soul. The lips of the righteous feed many, although probably their acts would also feed some physically. But fools die for lack of wisdom. We continue there. The mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue will be cut out. The mouth of the righteous and wisdom. Again, there's that link there. How can you tell what's within? How can you tell that there's wisdom? Well, it's brought forth. In fact, it's a phrase there, bringing forth, which was used in the concept many times of bringing forth fruit, being fruitful. So here we have the fruit, the mouth of the righteous bears fruit. What's that fruit? The fruit is wisdom that can be shared. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked what is perverse. Okay, the lips of the righteous know what is acceptable. A fairly general word for good there, the word acceptable. That which is pleasing to God, that's good. And also that which is good for mankind, for ourselves and for those that we might share, something about righteousness or something about God's wisdom. It is acceptable. It is good, pleasant, helpful to ourselves and to other people, as well as being pleasing to God. All right, we are moving. We're doing well. We may have to go ahead and do those, how not to use the tongues that we didn't get to last week here in a minute. The words of the wicked are, lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright will deliver them. Now, when you come to this, and you want to know what the commentators say, and of course, commentators are going to say everything impossible, I suppose, every possible explanation. You'll find them divided on this, but I think one way makes more sense than the other. The word them there, what does that refer to? mouth of the upright will deliver them. Is that them, the person who has the upright mouth? Or is it someone else? As we look at the whole of this particular proverb. It could deliver them, that's true. You know, if we have upright mouths that speak wisdom, it'll be good for us. We could deliver ourselves. But look what's really at view here. The words of the wicked are lying in wait for blood. There's some people out there who are going to fall prey to wicked people. They are at risk because some folks are just so evil that they're setting traps for them. Maybe they're lying in wait literally, like the guys that laid in wait for the person that the Good Samaritan found. You know, they just hid behind the rocks. He came by himself. They jumped out, beat him, took everything he had. Maybe they were lying in wait for blood in that way. Or maybe they're lying in wait for blood to assassinate somebody or ambush somebody verbally, to ambush their reputation in that sense. That kind of blood, not physical blood, but certainly a very hurtful way. Could have been either one. Okay, so when the wicked says something, here's what happens. Somebody gets hurt, as if they're just lying in wait for them physically or philosophically. But what will the mouth of the upright do for someone who is otherwise at risk? It will deliver them. It will provide safety. It will prevent them from being harmed. Let's say there's a case in which people are going to testify. There's something going on and somebody's freedom or somebody's penalty is at stake. And on one side, we've got these folks that want to lie in wait, and they're ready to say all kinds of evil things, like the people that testified, stirred up against Jesus, and even Paul, and, you know, other places in the Scripture where people were stirred up to say that which was not right, just lying in wait. Okay, if there's nobody to counter those people, what's going to happen? Somebody's going to suffer. But over here, we've got the righteous, the upright, the person who speaks wisdom, and everybody knows it. And he speaks up and says, no, here's the truth. And the truth sets that person free. The truth causes everybody to know that that person is not guilty of what they may have been accused of. And so the mouth of the upright delivers those who are at risk, from those who are wicked, from those who are untruthful. I think that fits the context of the proverb better, but you'll find people that describe it both ways there, that it's good for someone like that, or it's good for the person with the upright mouth. Both are certainly true. The wicked is ensnared by the transgression of his lips. In other words, unrighteous talk, it'll get us in trouble. It'll come back upon us. But the righteous will come through trouble. In other words, come out to the other side. And, well, as we'll see in a minute, they'll be rewarded. Well, let's continue with the thought there, because verse in line, a man will be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth, and the recompense of a man's hands will be rendered to him. So there we have two parallels that's making the same point. They're not in contradiction, they're making the same point. A man who has this righteous mouth, the man righteous will come through trouble. He'll be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth. Another way of saying that is the recompense of a man's hands will be rendered to him. He'll get a reward. He'll be rewarded, recompensed for a mouth that speaks righteousness. There are consequences there. Again, generally that's the case because it's a proverb. Is it always going to be the case? No, some people won't do what they should. Kendall? Yeah, I think that's pretty close to it. Okay. 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 Very much what the example I think he's getting at. Kendall's talking about the verse there about many will be fed, the lips of the righteous will feed many, building them up. It's encouraging them. It's making them feel better about themselves than they did before. The person who is perhaps discouraged, and they're going to be fed with reinforcement, with confidence, so that they can do what they need to do in a positive way. So that's a good comment on that verse. Anything else before we move on? We're still doing about right. Okay, let's go ahead to verse now. Who speaks like the piercings of a sword. We don't have to guess what that is, do we? That's somebody that hurts us. Their words hurt us. We have the phrase today, being stabbed in the back, don't we? And that sounds a whole lot like what happened here. Some people do that. They stab people in the back. It's like a sword being thrust into them symbolically. But the tongue of the wise promotes health. And this word here for health, we're going to see in two other Proverbs if we have time to get to them tonight, because that's one of the things that the health, that the righteous tongue is described as doing more than once. Health. A healing. That's what the word is there. The tongue of the wise. Use your tongue wisely. You can make people better. You can heal them. Not talking about physically, in particularly, talking about emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, able to go on. That which is broken and about to give up can be encouraged by the tongue of the wise. Anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad. And we have plenty of things to cause anxiety and bring about depression, don't we, in this world? And the world is filled with that, and sometimes the world, it's almost like the world revels in some of those things. But here's what a tongue properly used can do. A tongue based on wisdom. A good word makes it, that is the heart of the person, their spirit, their outlook, the part of them that needs encouragement, makes it glad. A good word. That's how powerful our words are. All these things that we looked at last week and this week, so powerful. The way that a tongue can hurt, or the way that a tongue can help, meaning all the difference in the world. And we see that brought out so many times here as we go through. Make it glad literally means to brighten up. You talk about, you really brightened up my day by saying that. Somebody says something kind to you, complimentary, you really brightened up my day. Well, that's right out of Proverbs. A good word will make it glad, will brighten up, will cause a person's countenance to brighten up, to look better. We continue, chapter 13 and verse 2. A man shall eat well by the fruit of his mouth, but the soul of the unfaithful feeds on violence. A man shall eat well. Again, we have the idea here of fruit, the fruit of his mouth. We talked before about the verse that talked about bringing forth fruit. And eating well here, the word or the phrase, well suggests pleasant. It suggests something that both looks delicious, and when you bite into it, it tastes delicious, which is a whole lot like the apples of gold and the settings of silver, isn't it? There's this pleasantness all around it. That's the reward, or the consequences of the person who speaks words of wisdom. They shall eat well by the fruit of their mouth. And also, sometimes, what's that other phrase, that other saying that we have? You're going to have to eat your words. Now, when we use that phrase, are we talking about things that look good and taste good? Not really. When we talk about somebody having to eat their words, it's usually the other way, isn't it? The soul of the unfaithful feeds on violence. Usually when we say eat your words, we're talking about something that, I wish I hadn't said that. That wasn't expedient. That wasn't helpful. That didn't edify. And now that, everything's said and done, whatever I was talking about, I've got to eat my words. They don't taste very good. The words that we have to eat, from that expression at least, are not very pleasant fruit to eat. All right, let's go on to chapter 15. We talked about this last week. I mentioned that to me, this is one of the foundational proverbs that we ought to try to remember, especially as we think about conflict in the world. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And I left it there just because it sets the tone for the other proverbs that we're looking at. I don't know that we need to discuss it again since we talked about it pretty well last week. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness, which causes us to ask this question. Can a person have all sorts of knowledge? Can they be filled with knowledge? Can they know everything there is to know about a subject? If they have a lot of titles on the end of their name, can they still misuse that knowledge? In so many ways, right? Okay. Well, let's pause to think of something. I was getting ready to try to name a few. Right. Right. Any examples in mind that you can think of right offhand where knowledge is just not mixed with, it's not used rightly? Evolution scientists, so many scientists that are knowledgeable by the way the world characterizes knowledge, but they don't have the wisdom there because they've rejected God's word and God's existence. Okay? A person, this is what Kendall's saying in so many words, a person could know the whole Bible, couldn't they, and not be applying that Bible. Doesn't mean they're living by it just because they know it. In fact, there are people out there who probably know the Bible as well as many of us who know it because they like to oppose it. There are people who write books and who post on the internet, and they know a lot about the Bible, but they twist it around to try to discredit the existence of God. What about if we're studying with someone about the Bible? Would it be possible to have a knowledge, all the knowledge that we have of God's Word and what they need to know, and still not present that with a tongue of wisdom? It could be, right? Because when we're trying to share the Bible with somebody, it's our nature many times to want to win arguments. Is that what studying the Bible with somebody is about? No. Our goal is to help them to understand and come to the conclusion this is the truth of God and act on that. I thought you had a hand. I'm sorry. But there's in a lot of ways. Knowledge is great when it's coupled with this heart and this tongue that speaks out of righteousness. A wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. We all know the idea of a tree of life, don't we? About the original tree of life. We think about that which provides, sustains existence, sustains life. And that's what a wholesome tongue can do. It can really sustain somebody. Or it can break the spirit if it's the wrong kind of tongue. The lips of the wise disperse knowledge, but the heart of the fool does not do so. Disperse is like sowing or spreading it, or even winnowing it. You know how they would throw grain up in the air, it would blow the chaff away, spread that, and then the grains would fall back down into their screen. Winnowing grain. That's another word for it here. They just share it everywhere. The lips of the wise disperse, they scatter out knowledge so that other people can have it too. Doesn't mean they talk all the time, right? We've already seen that. Be swift to hear, slow to speak. But it doesn't mean they keep it to themselves either. They disperse that which is good for people. Did we finish all of that one? Yeah. John. John points out Paul's statement to the Corinthians about man's wisdom is foolishness to God because man's wisdom is based on the wrong thing. Not really wisdom at all. And of course, when we're talking here in the Proverbs, almost every time, maybe every time, but at least almost every time, we're talking about the wisdom which is from above. We're talking about God's wisdom. And when we talk about the wisdom of man, we're talking about, the kind that would be on the perverse tongue or the unrighteous, the wicked tongue, because man's wisdom is so different than true wisdom. And to God, it's foolishness. And Paul talks about that to the Corinthians, and that's what John was reading there for us. Okay. Man has joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good it is. It is joyful to be able to have that answer that rolls in at the right time, isn't it? When there's somebody that needs encouragement, advice, or warning, and you can roll right in there and have the answer to help them. Yes, a brother or sister in Christ. Isn't that joyful? Due season. In other words, the opportune moment. This is as we talked about there before. Fitly spoken. How good it is to be able to do that at that particular time. And then the thoughts of the wicked are an abomination of the Lord, but the words of the pure are the word for righteous, free from wickedness, impurity, and evil. Not perfect, but, a different person than the unrighteous. Those words are pleasant. Those are the comments there from chapter 15. Pleasant, beautiful, or delightful. Let's continue chapter 16 now, if we can. Nick, I may need a little help. My clicker stopped working. Thank you. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the bones. There's that second time, maybe the third time already we read the word health. That means we can speak words which are remedies, they're medicine, they're a cure for what ails you. To another person that needs the right word spoken at the right time. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb. Honeycomb back then, honey was really special to them because they couldn't buy 5 pounds of sugar at Kroger in a bag. That kind of stuff didn't happen. Honey was, they loved it. When they could get it, it was a staple of their diet. It wasn't always plentiful. It was perhaps more of a luxury than it was a regular. But it was something that was common to have if you could. And pleasant words, they're like that honeycomb. Sweetness to the soul and health to the bones. You enjoy them, and it's good for you. And of course, today, they talk about how good honey is for you, especially if it's grown locally. So, or it's produced locally. So, back then they recognized the beauty of honey. Uh, Remember what Jonathan did? They were chasing the Philistines. And they found a honeycomb. He stuck his stick down there and, took a little bit of it, and his eyes lit up. Picture here, somebody speaking just the right words, good, pleasant words to somebody just the right time, and their eyes light up just like Jonathan did when in a physical way. Except here we've got the words hitting someone's system in a spiritually encouraging way. But we got to keep moving. Chapter 18. The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. They're a lot. They seem to be no end to them. They're a great source. The wellspring, of course, the wellspring is what? It's the source. The wellspring of wisdom is a flowing brook. In other words, wisdom can just keep coming and coming. It can be continually helpful. A man's stomach shall be satisfied from the fruit of his mouth. Again, the idea of bringing forth fruit by the words that we speak, bringing satisfaction. From the produce of his lips he shall be filled. Not physically, but spiritually. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. That's another perhaps fundamental proverb as far as the tongue is concerned. In it are death and life. It can be a word fitly spoken, or it can be a word designed to destroy, to weaken or discourage. That's how powerful the tongue is. And those who love it will eat its fruit. Most of the folks say that's probably talking about the ones who misuse the tongue. And those who misuse the tongue, there are consequences. They're going to eat the fruit, which is of course death. Continuing, there is gold and a multitude of rubies, but the lips of knowledge are a precious jewel. I think we perhaps say today something like, there's some valuable things out there, but let me tell you what's really important. I think that's what Solomon was saying. There's gold, a lot of rubies, a lot of the valuable things he could have named, which were within his ownership. But he's saying, what really is pearl of great price? As Jesus said, what's really valuable, precious jewel, it's the lips of knowledge. And of course, not just any knowledge, but the knowledge that comes from God, which used correctly correlates with wisdom. He who loves purity of heart and has grace on his lips, the king will be his friend. Again, a general statement of truth. People who are in positions of leadership, they're going to appreciate people, recognize and appreciate people whose heart and whose speech is pure. That is, they mean what they say what they mean. That's valuable. Leaders who have people around them that only say what they want to hear, they're going to suffer because of that. But it's a great thing to have someone who will tell you the truth in a loving way because your heart's right. And they give you wise counsel. The king will be his friend. Who do you think about in the Old Testament? Who were friends with the king because of their purity of heart and speech. Mordecai, and Esther too, for that matter. Somebody said something back here? Nathan to David. And what about Nehemiah? Over in captivity. What about Daniel over in captivity? What about Joseph before Pharaoh? We see men who were not expecting necessarily to accomplish what they accomplished, perhaps because of their background, but they were men who loved purity of heart and grace was on their lips. They spoke the oracles of God as the oracles of God. And so they were fulfillers of this particular proverb. Okay, this is one Solomon talking to his son, real personal here. My son, if your heart is wise, my heart will rejoice indeed, I myself. Yes, my inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak right things. Solomon said, I tell you what, you're going to make me proud if you speak that which needs to be spoken. If your heart is right and the words that come out of your mouth are right, you're going to make your dad proud. And of course, you make a lot of people proud that way, and especially you please God. Proverbs 24:26 is rather interesting. He who gives the right answer kisses the lips. We don't know where to go with that these days, do we? But to kiss the lips back then was something reserved for somebody for whom you had tremendous respect. To kiss someone on the lips meant you have this person up on a moral high place. So this person is to be respected. So what was like respecting somebody like that and giving a kiss? He who gives the right answer, you're honoring somebody as if you were setting them up on that pedestal. If you were kissing their lips, a physical form of greeting reserved for those who were very, very special. By long forbearance, a ruler is persuaded, and a gentle tongue breaks a bone. Even a hardened heart, hard as a bone. You argue with them, you fuss with them, you cause a problem, they're probably going to quit listening to you. But forbearance, persuasion, a gentle tongue persuades even a hard heart. It's cold water to a weary soul, so it's good news from a far country. The tongue can be used to bless. And that's most of them, and we're just going to have to stop right there. We've only got one more, two that we didn't get to. Next week we'll study another topic out of the book of Proverbs.